Writing Explained defines the phrase all hands on deck as an instance when all available people need to come help, especially in an emergency. It also explains the origin of the phrase as an expression with naval origin that may have originated in the 1700s. Hands is another word for sailors, and deck is part of the boat. In a storm or other emergency, the captain might yell, "All hands on deck." This is a command for all the sailors to come to the deck of the boat to help navigate the storm. In the church setting, this phrase just really reminded me of the church setting for whatever reason. But in the church setting, all hands on deck has to be something permanent. It's not just only for an emergency, it's not only for a specific time, but it's something that should happen all the time. We need everybody's hands on deck. We need everybody's help. We need everybody's involvement in our church. As I was kind of thinking about the subject, just thinking about different scripture passages to study and to present to you, I came up with a really, really, really long list of why it is that church involvement is so important to us. But I don't want to keep you here for 8 hours. You're welcome. And I also don't want you to have nightmares with my voice, so I'm only going to limit that list to 3 things. So this morning, I just want to present to you 3 very important reasons why it is so important for all of us, each and every one of us, to be involved in church in some way. And the first reason is, it is important because service is a crucial part of the Christian life. As we heard in the scripture reading this morning, the person that we follow, Jesus Christ, he didn't come to earth to be served, but to serve. And if we claim to be disciples of Jesus, if we claim to follow his will, then we will also follow his example. And we will also dedicate our lives to service. The Gospel of John emphasizes just the amazing life of service that Jesus had at the end of his gospel by saying that if all the things that Jesus did were written down, there wouldn't be enough space in the whole world to contain all the books. That's how much Jesus was doing. We get a small portion of what he did in the Gospels, but the reality of his ministry, only 33 years on earth, was so great, his disciple says, that the whole world could not contain all the books that would be written. And, okay. That was not planned. It's not for effect. It wasn't enough that he did all these things, but also he ultimately gave his life for humanity. And this is the person that we follow. This is the Messiah. And it is impossible, I believe it is impossible for us to call ourselves Christians, for us to say that we're followers of Christ and not be involved in his work somehow, and not want and desire to serve humanity as Jesus did. I just want to bombard you a little bit with other scriptural passages that speak to this. And just because as you look at the Bible, and as I was looking at this topic, I found so many Bible verses. And because I had to look them up, I'm just going to read them to you, just so that my work is not in vain. So just bear with me. Galatians 5:13. For you were called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love become slaves to one another. John 12:26. Whoever serves must follow me, and where I am, there will my servant be also. Whoever serves me, the Father will honor. Joshua 22:5. Take good care to observe the commandments and instruction that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his commandments, and to hold fast to him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. 1 Peter 4:10. Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. And I'm going to leave it at that for now. And before I continue talking about it, I want you to understand what I'm trying to say here when I say serve. Because we do serve an amazing, gracious, and merciful God who doesn't want to run us down to the ground. So even though Jesus set the ultimate, most amazing example, I think God also understands that we have challenges, that we have different circumstances, and we also have different seasons in our life where we're able to do more at times than at other times. And I think God understands that. But the fact that we are not required to just overwhelm ourselves with work and just to be doing much, much more than we're capable of doing, or even to serve in areas that maybe is not our strength, even though we're not required to do that, we're still required to at least give it thought and to prayerfully consider how we can be of service to God. And we can do so in big ways, like I said, but we can also do so in small ways. And even if you think that just if you're able to help in a small way, or even if you're only able to help once a month or once every 2 months, if you're able to do that consistently, and you may think that's not enough, that's not a lot, so therefore why am I going to do it? I can guarantee you that it does help. And it's deeply appreciated by God and also by the other people who are helping out a church. And so I want to read something to you that Pastor Donald Whitney wrote in his book, Spiritual Disciplines for the Christian Life, which I think it's quite relevant. He says, you may feel overlooked. You may feel limited by an unusual schedule. You may be physically incapacitated, but you can still find ways to serve. People with unusual schedules or physical limitations often make powerful intercessors in prayer ministry. That's one example. Despite the restrictions, those with hearts to serve always find a way to serve. And then he goes on and he tells the story, which I'm going to read verbatim because I don't want to mess it up. And when I tell stories from somebody else, a lot of times I mess them up. So I don't like to read too much, but you're going to have to put up with that. Because it's like such a cool, interesting story. He says, when I think of a faithful willingness to serve, I remember a quiet little man from a church where I was a staff member. On his arrival, he was always unnoticed, for he would come long before anyone else. Yet, he buried his old car into an obscure corner of the parking lot to leave the best places for others. He unlocked all the doors, got the bulletins, and then waited outside. When you walked up, he'll give you a bulletin and a big smile. But he couldn't talk. He was embarrassed when newcomers asked him questions, something that happened to his voice long ago. When I met him, he was into his 60s and living alone. When he had car trouble, which was often, he never let anyone know, so he would walk more than a mile to come to church. Because of his vulnerability, he was robbed and beaten several times, at least twice during the 3 years I was in that church. Some longtime church members told me they suspected he lost his voice as a result of being bitten years before. He had extensive arthritis, which stooped his shoulders and prevented him from turning his neck. It made hard work of unlocking doors and handing out bulletins, but he was always there, always smiling, even though he couldn't speak a word. Everything about his life worked to keep him unheralded. And in the background, even his name, Jimmy Small. Yet, despite his drawbacks, setbacks, handicaps, and a plethora of potential excuses, he willingly served God, and he served them in a disciplined way, which in the sight of God was neither small nor in vain. And again, we don't all have to be heroes. And a lot of times people judge other people. Well, that person has the same challenges that person has. Why are they not doing what that other person is doing? But that's so wrong. We don't know the whole story. We don't know if the person has other challenges that we don't know about. We just don't know the whole story. And we just cannot allow ourselves to say things like that. And we also should not allow ourselves to compare ourselves to other people who are doing things. We just have to look at ourselves, and this pastor that I was just reading about, he says that one of the best things that we can do if we want to serve, if we want to be in the service of God, if we acknowledge the fact that we should be useful in the service of God, the first thing we need to do is kneel down and pray and say, God, here I am. Now show me what to do. And again, it may be in a small way, it may be in a big way, but it is something that we need to do regardless. The second thing that I wanted to highlight about the importance of why we need all hands on deck is that when we all become involved, we prevent burnout in church. And this is a very real thing that happens in a lot of churches. And it doesn't matter if the church is big or if the church is small. Research says that about 90% of church duties are done by 1/3 of the church members. Okay? 90% of the duties are done by 1/3 of the members. That causes burnout. That causes burnout. The scripture says in Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. We have to share the burden. And sometimes it does become a burden to some people who are overworked, who wear so many different hats, and they have no help. And they can't even do things for their own personal life because they're so involved and they're so trying to keep the whole thing from falling apart. And we just cannot allow that to happen. That's why it's so important for all of us to even do a little bit of help to alleviate the burdens of other people who are already doing so many other things. So many people just go on in this way and then they reach a breaking point where they just can't do it anymore. They just walk out and then they just want to sit on a pew for years and years and years because they're just so exhausted from doing all that work. We lose a lot of key people in that way. Sure, I'll say like a little side note on this. There are people who have trouble sharing responsibilities. There are people who have trouble saying no. There are people who think they're indispensable. There are people who think only they can do certain tasks. And there are people who have trouble delegating. And I will say I find myself in some of those. I'm not going to tell you which one. But we've all seen people who are, highly involved. Sometimes it's because they have trouble sharing, or sometimes they have trouble letting go and letting other people do things. I will say that. However, as I read this text from Galatians, bear one another's burdens, I think that also qualifies as a burden that we need to share. I mean, the church is a place where we help each other out. It's a place where we share with each other the good and the bad. And some people may have more evident needs than other people. So some people may need our help, helping them to delegate better, helping them to let go a little bit, helping them to, hey, brother, sister, other people can do this. You go and sit down. So that may actually be a need of a person. So, instead of, again, it's just the attitude of, oh, that person is so controlling and they want to do everything. Instead of looking at people with those eyes, if we can look at people with more merciful eyes, maybe we can be of help and even help in this manner. Having said that, though, most people who are deeply involved in church and who you see running around all the time would really, really appreciate the help. I'm going to put Bonnie on the spot since she's not here. But she tells me sometimes, I wouldn't mind just coming to church one Sabbath and just sitting there and not having to do anything. And I think that's how a lot of people who wear many hats feel sometimes. You just want to come to church one day and just be able to sit on the pew and just listen and just participate in the worship service and not have to be in the kitchen like she is right now. So it's just so important for all of us to try to take a little bit of that burden that some people are experiencing, and just to say, hey, look, I'm going to do this for you. And also not always have to have people ask, because even having to ask all the time, can you do this, can you do this, can you do this, gets old. And people feel like they're so annoying, like you get to the point where you feel so annoying. So it's nice for somebody to just come to you and say, can I help you with something? Do you need something? Hey, this week I'm going to be here. Can I do something to alleviate your burdens? It's just, most people would really, really appreciate that. And like I said, I know that not everybody can commit to doing things every week. And it's also not about having to be here all the time, at every meeting, not ever being able to take Sabbath off to go and walk in nature, or to be with your family, or to take a vacation, or to travel. It's not about that. It's about, with the time that you have, with the life that you have, taking into consideration your challenges and your capabilities, just being able to offer of yourself whatever you can, whether in a big way or in a small way. That's what it's about. Ellen White says in Ministry of Health, page 147, multitudes leave it to institutions and organizations the work of benevolence. They excuse themselves from contact with the world, and their hearts grow cold. They become self-absorbed and unimpressible. Love for God and man dies out of the soul. Christ commits to his followers an individual work, a work that cannot be done by proxy. Ministry to the sick and poor, giving the gospel to the lost, is not left to committees or organized charities. It is individual responsibility, individual effort, personal sacrifice is the requirement of the gospel. And so it happens a lot of times that I know that the people who are the most active and the people who actually stay in church for the long term are the people who are involved. I mean, it's no secret. When you come to church and you don't really have a lot to do, and even if you don't find a community in the church, if you don't interact with people, you start to kind of, you start to find other stuff to do. Let's put it that way. You start finding other stuff to do, and it's a slow fade. And when you want to realize it, you're already not attending church anymore. And it happens. And so she's very right when she says that if we're not constantly engaging in service, constantly trying to help and trying to find ways in which we can be involved, we will slowly start to become cold to the needs of people. We start to become unimpressed by what's been said. I remember that when I was more involved with young adults, there was a concept that I learned called church hopping, which for whatever reason I never knew. I learned this when I started working with young adults. And this concept is that a lot of young adults, they like to church hop, go to different churches every week. They don't like to be in one church and stay there and try to help out that church, but kind of keep their options open to see if something exciting is happening here or there, so we can go and hang out with those people. So I used to be part of a big church, and we used to have a Bible study on Friday nights, and we had like 30 people showing up consistently. And when we had activities, all these people would show up and whatnot. But then when we needed to do something, like the young adult group was leading a potluck or anything that happened at church, we had 4 people. So I started to learn how important it is for people to find a church family and to set roots and to be available consistently, because it's so difficult to plan things when you don't really know who's available, or when you don't know who can help consistently. When you have to kind of guess and show up and hope for the best and hope that God will provide somebody, that's really stressful. So it's so important for people to just set roots, and also to give the leaders information on what to expect and consistently be available to them. And the third thing that I want to bring up to you guys about why all hands on deck is so important is that if we want to do something amazingly in this church, and if we want to do something amazing in the community, we have to be everyone has to be in it. We can't do amazing things here and out there with only a small fraction of people involved and with a small fraction of people fully committed and with a small fraction of people believing in the mission of what we're trying to accomplish. We need everybody. We need all the help that we can get. All the big movements and just big accomplishments in history happen when a group of people were all 100% in, we're all 100% committed. The early church, we read in Acts 2:42, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship and to the breaking of bread and prayers. That's what the early church was doing. If the early church had decided that we're going to show up whenever we want to, or today I just don't feel like it, or let me keep my options open to see if something better pops up, we would not have the Christian movement that we have today. We would not have it. It was just because some people decided we're going to do it. Yes, I may be disabled. I may not have a whole lot of time. I may not be able to speak well in public. I may be able to do this, but whatever it is that I can do, I will do. We're all in one spirit, we're all of one mind, and we're all moving together with all the different functions that we can perform. And that is how we do amazing things. That is how we change the world. We can't change the world when we just do things when we feel like it. We cannot have an impact in our community when not even we are convinced of what we're doing. When we're not even convinced that it's worth it to come to church or to help people or to take the message of Christ. And that's why it's so important for all of us to be in on it. Before I close, I want to show you a video. This is what I'm telling you this morning. It's not a new concept by any means. It's not a new thing. And in fact, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has actually, for the past few years, really been thinking hard about this because they realize all the benefits that we gain when we have total member involvement, or TMI. This is an initiative that the church has been trying to promote, and they have an amazing video that they put together, and I wanted to share that with you this morning so you can be more encouraged, I would say.
The General Conference is launching a new, visionary, bold initiative called Total Member Involvement.
I believe with all my heart that Jesus is coming very soon.
Every church member can do something. That's what total member involvement is all about.
The Lord has placed on my heart a huge burden, a burden to help each of us realize that we must be totally involved in God's last day message. And that has to do with everything from speaking the word to living the word, following Christ's example in everything, helping people physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually.
Thousands and thousands of lay people are actively involved in praying for their neighbors and giving Bible studies and distributing literature. But whatever we have done up until this point, it is not yet total member involvement.
One of the greatest challenges we face is the devil's attempt to neutralize our mission, endeavor, and focus because we don't have a relationship with the Lord.
I'm reminded of what Ellen White said in Desire of Ages, page 142. In order to develop a character like Christ, we must work as he worked. There's something about service, something about ministry, something about witnessing that brings revival to our own hearts. This is why I am so encouraged about total member involvement.
There are so many examples all over the world as to what God is doing through His members, through those who are really committed to Him. There in Chitunguiza in Harare, Zimbabwe, thousands of people involved in specific assignments in reaching people with the precious message, whether they were visiting, whether they were helping out in a health expo, whether they were doing Bible studies, whether they were just welcoming people. Whatever it was, they were involved.
In Zimbabwe itself, there were over 918 meetings going on at the same time all across that great country. And in the end, 30,000 people were baptized.
A beautiful example in San Antonio, Texas. Literally thousands of people involved in reaching out to the community of San Antonio.
Over 700 people were baptized.
One of the things that really amazed me about San Antonio and that Your Best Pathway to Health was that total involvement. 1,500 people involved, ministering to the needs of over 6,100 individuals that came. Many of them stayed all night in line. And as I watched what God did, it was amazing.
In Harare, Zimbabwe, over 30,000 people were affected through this special outreach, which God says is the right arm of the gospel. One can praise the Lord and say, wow, that's great, it happened over there, but what am I going to do in my little place?
What about the difficult parts of the world? What about postmodern culture? I know this, some places are more difficult than others. But if you don't believe that you can win people for Christ in that setting, you won't win anybody.
I want to tell you the Lord has a job for all of us, and God is going to bless you regardless of how small the operation or how large.
Doing something gives God an avenue to bless.
The real factor is your commitment to the Lord and to following Christ's method alone.
How can I, as a church member, become involved in total member involvement? The first thing that I think is significantly important is to get on your knees and begin to pray and say, Lord, I am consecrating myself to you. I'm giving myself to you. What do you want me to do? Whatever it is, whether it's to be an intercessor in prayer and concentrate on a prayer ministry, whether it is actively involved in health ministry, whether it's literature ministry, whether it's children's ministry, whether it's Bible study ministry or preaching.
I just feel an overwhelming burden that all of us need to be involved. Everyone has a job that the Lord can provide. Everyone can be a missionary for Jesus, no matter whether you're in a sophisticated society or in a simple setting. God can use each of us.
Jesus has given us a great commission to go and preach and teach and baptize. The commission is to you personally. It's to me, no matter who you are.
Why not get on your knees and say, Jesus, I want to be an active witness for you. I want to be involved, totally, completely involved with the entire church in total member involvement.
Can't do that with just a few people. I want to highlight something that one of them said. I don't remember which one of them. He said, when you do something, you give God an opportunity to bless. And that is so true. You know, if we're not doing it, if we just sit and say, well, I can't contribute, I can't do much because I'm this or that or the other, God can't bless that. But if you at least move and try to do something, that's when God can actually bless. And just to make it very practical this morning, we have many opportunities in our church for help. We have many opportunities for people to be involved at various degrees of involvement. I know that we have greeter ministry, where Nehemiah or Gideon would be happy to reel you in if you're interested. We have a deaconess ministry where Annis and Ben would be more than happy to get help, because these are especially ministries that don't have a lot of support. So if any of you is interested in supporting those ministries and relieving the burden of the few people that are doing it, it's more than appreciated. We have telling children's story, and I'm sure that Patty would appreciate help in that. Children's Sabbath schools, Patty and Annis, again, would be appreciative of that. Sabbath school ministry, where Frank would be appreciative of that one. And probably some other ministries that I'm not, potluck or bringing food. Bonnie would love help with that and not having to always ask people. And socials, Debbie would be happy to have people planning activities and helping her with different things that she plans. And there's other activities, there's other things. If you don't remember that, come up to me, come up to John Wilbur. He's right here. And come up to us and tell us, hey, look, I want to help in this way. I have this much time, or what can I do? Just let me know how I can be of service, and we'll be more than happy to place you somewhere. And I can guarantee you that your spiritual life will be boosted, and just everybody else will really appreciate what you're doing, and you'll be a hero. I will put it that way. So it is my prayer today that we all can feel that need for service, that we all, as followers of Christ, have that desire burning in our hearts to do something, whatever that may be, however big or however small, that we all may feel that desire to be involved and to be part of this amazing mission and this amazing work that is happening. That's my prayer for us this morning.